The Hilton Parish Council annual parish meeting. Thank you for coming. Right. Where are we? Welcome and introduction. So this is the annual parish meeting. This is a chance or an opportunity for organisations within the village to tell us what we up to over the last year. It's also a chance for me to spout on a bit about the Parish Council business of the year, and then the responsible financial officer, and then we've got have you got reports from county?
No, unfortunately not.
Fair enough. And then we have some reports from village groups, including Hilton Town Trust, Hilton Feast Week, Hilton Village Hall, Hilton Action Against Traffic, and Hilton Community Garden, and Speedwatch. Sorry, that's a late entry. So we'll crack on. The next item on the agenda is apologies, and I don't think we received any. No. Next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the annual parish meeting held on the 28th of March 2022. Now, who was here? I was here. Sue was here. Board Parishioners. No other parish councillors, but I'm happy with them. They look all right to me. You were here, Andy?
I was.
You got no objections to them? Sue? Then we'll accept.
I haven't met them.
They were wonderful. They are
I'm
wonderful.
sure.
Yeah. They cover basically everybody who says something. We get a copy of their report and we put it in to the minutes. So on that basis, I would propose that we accept those minutes. Who can vote on it? Yeah.
I don't often get to vote.
Anybody else? Andy, Sue, if you want to.
I haven't read most of them, but I'm sure they're fine.
We'll accept them as, and if there's anybody reads them and says, we'll do you regard? I can't do this now because it's my bit next.
It is your bit. So.
Yeah, I'll do it when you're doing it. Right, okay, so the annual review of Parish Council business, Chairman's report for the year to the, I was going to say it's the 31st of March, because that's when the year ended, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. That's when you've done your financial report. The year started just after the election in May, and when we welcomed Councillors Capes, Dolstone, Sage and Sarkis to the Parish Council and said farewell to Councillors Barradale, Collard, Stott and Walker. More recently, Councillor Dunker stepped down, and last month we welcomed Richard Norton to the Parish Council. I hope all councillors have enjoyed their time on council to date. It's been great to see the newer councillors getting involved in the various committees and working groups, and I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank those who are no longer on the council. Their help and support was much appreciated in the previous years. Also, special thanks to Graham Barrow for all the unpaid work he undertook around the village as a parish council handy person. As Chairman, I appreciate all the debate at meetings and thank councillors and the clerk for their support over the past year. At District Council level, we saw the election of Claire Tevlin as our representative, or our District Councillor if you like. The Parish Council welcomes her attendance at our meetings and for the information she passes on to us. We have also seen our County Councillor, Doug Dew, attend our meetings on a regular basis, and I'm grateful for the support he gives the village at county level. The year has seen no restrictions on council meetings from COVID measures. I think I'm correct in saying all public meetings have been held in person over the last 12 months, which is good. Nicola has continued to excel in the role of clerk and responsible financial officer. Nicola has ensured that the Parish Council meets its legislative requirements, that meetings are conducted in a proper manner, and ensures that financial reports are available at any time. So, what have we done? Traffic items remain an area of concern in the village, and though we have enjoyed a year of the HGV ban, there are still commercial vehicles seen through the village from time to time. I'm sure we'll hear more about that from Ken Scratchdown and from Hat later on this subject. The Parish Council had a local highway initiative bid approved to reduce the speed limit across the green from 40 to 30 miles per hour. The next bid submitted was for a new sign to be placed on the Papworth bypass, advising drivers in advance of the HGV ban on the Potton Road, and that bid is going through the LHI system at the moment. Speeding remains a concern, and the Parish Council approached parishioners on their views on a possible bid for a speed limit of 20 miles per hour across all roads in the village. We had a fantastic response of 163 replies, and 78% of those respondents were in favour of the Parish Council taking this bid forward. Thank you to everybody who took the time to reply. We don't normally get replies up to 163 people. Our bid will be submitted and then we're going to see if we're successful in that proposal. At this time I'd like to thank the various groups involved in traffic matters in the village, including Hatton Speedwatch. Maintaining the green is one of the major areas of expenditure for the Parish Council. The grass has to be cut regularly, the trees are inspected annually to assess what maintenance is required to keep the public safe, and work is undertaken in the churchyard village garden and on the ditches. The Parish Council is lucky to have Ian Stott as its Green Open Spaces Officer, and Ian has agreed to continue in that role after stepping down as councillor. Ian arranges the annual tree inspections and works with various contractors to select what works needs to be undertaken. He arranges the sessions of ivy cutting, tree maintenance that can be undertaken safely, and recently arranged for the trees that the Parish Council obtained under the Woodland Trust grant to be planted. He also advises on locations for memorial trees. In other tree news, I attended a feedback session regarding the completed A14 Southern Bypass and commented on the number of trees planted under the scheme that have died. It was pleasing to note there is a programme of works by Highways England underway to replace many of those dead trees. The dredging of the ponds was undertaken thanks to a grant secured by the Parish Council. This work was undertaken in consultation with the Cambridgeshire County Council's Flood Resilience Officer. The work could not have been undertaken without the support of the grant received, although this did not include the removal of the spoil. Action on this is still being considered, with perhaps the ability to remove the spoil on a more cost-effective basis. If not, the previous proposal of spreading this across the wilderness will have to be re-examined. Toxicity tests have confirmed the spoil is not toxic, but would need to be sifted if it were to be spread. However, the Parish Council is hopeful that the local contractor expressing an interest in removing it will prove to be cost effective, and this can be done once the ground in the wilderness is a little firmer. I had a look back at my previous reports for the annual meeting, and you want to change the words around, but the firework display in November was fantastic, and from what I can tell, attendance was at a record level. The Parish Council thanks all those involved in making this event such a success. And I think when I look back in the other reports, just said, what a great report. Each year has been getting better and better. So thank you everybody, that's really good. There have been a couple of successful bids for equipment to be used to help getting people active, including fold-away table tennis table and equipment, and a Huntingdon District Council Health Inequalities Grant that has provided funding for some cricket coaching equipment, cookery courses, funding for tea/coffee on the green for 20 Thursdays in the winter, and other items of outdoor equipment. I think that includes a big chess set when I was looking through the minutes. Yeah. Right. Finally, you'll be pleased to hear, as you'll be aware, the coronation of King Charles takes place on the 6th of May. The Village Hall are leading on organising events, and I look forward to hearing further on this in their report. The Parish Council are holding, led by Councillor Starkey's, a litter picking event on the 8th of May. That's it. I now look forward to receiving reports from the clerk and other representatives of other groups within the village. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to find those up there. Not that it's not going to go that way. Okay. You've hopefully all got a copy that's slightly easier to read. So the precept amount in this financial year increased to £31,550. As Peter mentioned, the income from the bonfire night was higher than expected and the highest on record at £2,633. Cost of payroll increased from £10,945 to £13,689 due to an additional payment of £1,000 for 100 hours in lieu, that was in full and final settlement. And the fact that the salary award for both the 21-22 financial year and the 22-23 financial year were actually paid in the same year due to delays in the unions and the national employers agreeing the salary awards. As Peter mentioned, the council received about £10,000 for the Health Inequalities project. Most of this will be spent in next financial year on initiatives such as cricket and cookery courses. The dredging grant was £37,800. Most of this has already been spent, but there is a small remainder which will be spent on removing the waste from the wilderness, but this can't be done until the ground is drier. The grant from the National Lottery for the table tennis table and equipment was £1,367. The council received a donation from the Hilton Wildlife and Conservation Group of £691.55 to purchase a plastic bench which has been placed by the bridge to the wilderness. Like everyone else, unfortunately the Parish Council's utility costs have increased from £1,927 to £2,599. The cost of the maintenance contracts also increased from £7,920 to £8,727, but this is well within the council's set budget of £10,000. The cost of subscriptions seems to increase from 206 to 604, but this is because the Capalc invoice was actually paid in the previous financial year, so it's slightly skewed the figures. The cost of the election was £163 as it was a not contested election. The council made several donations, including £100 to the Community Garden for bird food, £213.50 to Hilton Action on Traffic for replacement batteries for the mobile speed indicating device, and their usual £60 to the Royal British Legion. The reserves haven't been agreed by the council yet, but if the recommended amounts are earmarked, the general reserves will then be set at £7,393, which is lower than the agreed 50% of precept, but is higher than last year. Looking forward then to this financial year, the Parish Council has resolved to increase the precept to £34,606, which is an increase of 9.7%, and works out as an increase of 14 pence per household per week for a Band D house. Unfortunately, the tax base has decreased from 455 to 451, which then means that everyone's contribution increases marginally, but we have no control over this. It's calculated by looking at the equivalent number of Band D properties in the parish, adding the number of houses due to be built and taking away those properties in receipt of council tax support or single person supplement. Does anybody have any questions on the accounts? Just like to add there, obviously these are unaudited at this point. So at least we've reached the end of the financial year this time.
Right, thank you, Nicola. What's next then? Next is, on here it says, reports from county and district councillors. Unfortunately, we don't have reports from county or district councillors. Right, so the next bit is reports from village groups. First on the list, Hilton Town Trust. Oh, good evening.
Okay. Many of you will have heard this basic report spouted out year after year after year, which is all well and good, but the Town Trust is very much a sort of piece of living history, really. I was having this conversation before. If you think, it originated from bequests from William Sparrow and Roger Peck back in 1698. And it's rolled on from there. It's changed in a number of ways. If anyone would like to know the actual detail of any of this, I'll happily talk to you about it afterwards rather than take up the meeting as such. But it's a fascinating bit of village history, the way that it's panned out. You may be aware where the allotments are on the road to Papworth. The Town Trust received that, there's 26 acres there actually, of which the allotments is just a part. The Town Trust was allocated that land as part of the 1840 enclosures and has held it ever since. So, fascinating history. I particularly looked at it this year because we're actually updating the bank accounts, so we've had to go and come up with the governing documents to support these accounts. So we've been back through the files, which is why this is particularly pertinent for me for this year. So, as we said, yes, the main deed that governs the Town Trust charities dates back from 1899, and I found it in the files the other day. So And back then, the yearly income from land and cottages was a whole £41. Quite significant in those days. The Town Trust actually operates two different charities. The estate charity essentially holds the assets associated with, like, the land as I've just described, and the buildings that the trust used to have around the village were all sold. The final sales were done back in the mid-1980s. The revenue, the monies from that have been put into investments, and those investments then generate an income which comes through every year. So that is the income from those investments and rent on the land is typically £10,000 a year as an order of magnitude. Of that, half of it is paid to the church for the upkeep of the building, and the other half goes to the town charity, and it's from the town charity then that various bequests and grants are made based, and those grants really, the trustees have no specific mandate other than to be for the benefit of the village and villagers of Hilton. So really the financial report really is about the town charity for this year, and the financial year for the trust runs on a calendar year basis. So this is for 2022. At the start of the year there was £24,877 pounds in hand. Income in the year was £5,000 from the estate charity, plus there was interest of £277. There was also a kind donation made by one parishioner towards the cost of living support scheme that the trust ran, and a little more on that in a minute. The project supported by the town charity in 2022, the cost of living support scheme was the major one. There was also a grant of £350 to the community garden, and there was support for a young person who's attending the World Scout Jamboree, which is due to happen this summer. So by the end of 2022, the town charity had £26,975 in hand, and therefore available for any other requests that come through. Expected income during 2023 is £5,000. I just want to come back to the cost of living support scheme that was put together. Clearly, there was a good deal of concern as the cost of living went up over last winter. In response to that, the trustees put together a scheme where they provide £200 grants to individuals or families that were in need of assistance. And it was very, very broadly done. The first round of the scheme happened in November and December 22, and in total the grants given out were total £2,200. That was the first round of the scheme. A second round also went out in February and March 23, and we'll see in next year's accounts, and the amounts are fairly similar. What I can say is that these amounts were never going to solve the cost of living issue for people, but they were certainly very gratefully received by the recipients, And it was also a chance for the trustee, for the trust, to be able to interact with people and make sure that they're aware that there could be other things that people could apply for if they had some specific needs. So it's been a very useful exercise from doing that. No decision yet on whether to repeat the scheme during the winter, this year. We'll see how it all goes, I guess, and that applies to all of us. I would also say that the trustees are also considering other types of schemes along that line as well, just for other specific groups, really as a way of, having said there's 26,000 available, we keep going out and saying to people, there are funds available. Getting people to come forward is a perennial problem, actually. Fascinating. But we're trying to offer things in specific areas so that people feel that they can come forward associated with that. And that may be an area to expand further. That's it. Thank you.
Has anybody got any questions for Phil?
I got one, Phil. The 26 acres that is around the allotment, is that rented out to a local farmer?
Yes.
That's not being used?
Yeah,
that's part of the income, is it?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Alan Rule has a long-term lease on to use that land.
Okay.
Was it difficult administering those grants to people in need? Because presumably you had to make a decision whether they should have it or not. I mean, I hope you didn't have that difficulty, but it does occur to you.
Right. No, there was no decision made. The trustees took the view that this was a blanket, a blanket grant that would be available for anyone who came forward and said they were in need. So there was no, the decision was taken in advance. So administering it, in a sense, was straightforward.
But you didn't have to decide whether those people deserved it or not.
Correct, because the decision that was taken by the trustees is if people felt that they had that need and came forward, who were we to argue with that? And the aim was to make it as simple and as easy to access as possible, because frankly a lot of times people don't want to come forward and or feel that they're in that sort of need. So the easier we could make that, absolutely the better. And that's why it was essentially pre-approved, and it merely needed people to come forward and request.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Phil, for coming along again. Very good. Next on the list is Hilton Feast Week, and that would be Nicola.
Me. So 2022 was a great success. We had the marquee back on the green for the full week, which was wonderful. So massive thank you to everyone that contributed and volunteered to make that happen. This year we have 2 new committee members, which brings us to a total of 12. Fundraising is going really well. We've had some lovely events, very well attended. We do have 2 more events this year, the coronation party, which will happen on the 6th of May, and our silent disco on the 17th of June. So obviously, I'm sure you're all going to be there on the green with your headphones on, popping away. We are still looking for advertisers in the Feast Week programme. So if you would like to advertise, or you know of anyone that would like to advertise, please do get in touch. And I was just going to touch on our 200 Club, which continues to be a great source of income for us, and a relatively passive source of income. Whilst we have to do the draw each month, it doesn't involve quite so much work as running a quiz. So if you aren't a member of the 200 Club and would like to become a member, do get in touch. We would love to have you on board. And obviously we are looking forward to Feast Week this year, which will be the 23rd to the 29th of July, with a Wild West theme. So I want to see lots of cowboy boots, cowboy hats, yee-haws, and we'll see you all there.
And bingo.
And bingo, obviously, which is the highlight of the week. The expert bingo caller.
That's self-promotion.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mention
Don't forget the bingo. Right, now, did you want a break?
Yes.
Okay, then Andy, would you like
Oh.
to do Hilton Act?
Yep.
And then we'll go back to
I'll do it out here only because those people
Well, the chair.
that those people that weren't aware of the meeting or couldn't come might be useful for them to
And
work.
before you start, do you have something you can send to
I
me?
have.
Marvellous.
I have. These are only notes, but I will turn them into something you can look
Thank
at.
you.
So, it's Hilton action on traffic, not against traffic. We're not against traffic, really, but we are concerned about the traffic that comes through the village and have been. So a bit of history for those that don't know. HAP was formed 22 years ago. Bill Holford, who a number of you I know, really kicked it off when things were really pretty bad. Well, they've been bad all the time. And he worked tirelessly gathering data, lobbying, talking to the council, and went forward to try and actually get this ban about 10 or 12 years ago, and was unsuccessful at that point. And the reason for the reason for being unsuccessful were that at the time, laws were different. There was the Hawleys Association, which brought in barristers to lobby very much against this, and also Dairy Crest, the big dairy, was in Fenstanton, as you know, and they also lobbied very hard because a lot of their vehicles came through. So luckily, a lot's happened since then. Dairy Crest are shut down, the A14 is now open, so that gives another reason, and therefore the second application for that was successful, as we all know. So it's just worthwhile talking a bit about that. And as I said, Bill was very, very fundamental in kicking all that off. It's a shame he left the village before he saw the fruition of all this coming to it. HAT has been involved in a number of other activities. I guess before the LHI TRO for the weight limit came into force, one of the things we did do is we submitted our own LHI bid, that's a Local Highways Initiative bid, for funding to get the two devices which you've probably seen around the village. One is a speed indicator device which is currently located down at Church End. We'll leave it there because that's by far the worst speeding place, but it has been around the village to other locations. And we also have a logging device which measures all the vehicles coming through the village, and that's really quite complex. That does size, speed, direction, time. It gives a lot of really good data. And that was a successful bid we had, supported by Town Trust and others to buy that equipment, and also a parishioner helped towards the funding of that as well, which we were very grateful for. It's about £8,000, so it wasn't insignificant. And that data's been really useful ever since. We've used that as part of a number of other bids. The good example is the LHI bid for the weight restriction. So we submitted a huge amount of data that we'd collected over that period to partly justify that. We also used it as part of the Parish Council speed reduction across the village green, put the device over there. So that's been earning its keep, so to speak, and I think probably still is. Just wanted to mention that. So we first heard about, obviously, the success of the weight restriction just over a year ago now. It was last February, March, I think, that the decision was made. And at that point, we sort of got our planning hats on. So HAT is a group of people. Ken Atwood, as Peter mentioned, is the chair. Unfortunately, isn't here. I'm vice chair. And there's a number of other villagers that volunteer to help out with the activities that we do as part of that. So I just wanted to mention that we're a small, perfectly formed group. When we first heard about that, a number of things happened. I knew that we were going to have problems with the vehicles still coming through even after the ban, and that was sort of a given. So one of the things I did and we did is we contacted, as an example, all the sat-nav companies. Now the problem there is that when maps are notoriously out of date, a lot of people use their sat-navs, and if the sat-nav maps are out of date, then we knew they'd use that as an excuse to come through, say, well, my sat-nav said come through, that's perfectly all right. So started contacting those back last April time, and they've just about caught up now. It takes a long time to get those maps updated and propagate through the supply chain, because there are a lot of different companies that utilise those, but we've had quite a lot of success, and that was really quite useful. We also contacted the police to see what help they could give us, and they were pretty useless right up until Christmas, quite honestly. We had a number of attempts where I had sat down with meetings with police inspectors and various police who nodded an awful lot and said, yeah, we can help you and we'll do all of this, and then absolutely nothing happened. And I have to say we were very disappointed because they just effectively went off air and weren't interested, and very, very disappointed with that. And also with the County Council as well. As we've already mentioned, signage is pretty poor, and we knew there was a whole lot of things we needed to put in place, or help put in place, to try and educate the HGV drivers not to come through. And if they don't know about it, sadly the signs aren't really any good, then how are they going to know? So we started that process. And the County Council are pretty useless as well in that respect. Ken and I went over to Shire Hall and met with the police and the council about 2 months ago. Lots of nodding and went on, and absolutely nothing happened from that either. Basically they said that legally the signs are okay. That's it. You know, good enough because they're legally okay, not that they are good enough or there's sufficient of them. So that, I have to say, was incredibly disappointing and still is. But we're not giving up. We never give up. You might have seen some additional little signs appearing around the back of the bypass. So the squirrels have been out putting a few other signs up, and we might have to do a bit more of that because the council just aren't going to do anything at all. Just for information's sake, there are 5 warning signs. If you're coming south through the restriction, drivers pass up to 5 warning signs before they hit the restriction, warning of the up-and-coming restriction. From the south, there are none. There are no warning signs before you get to the restriction. And that's what we were really asking the council for. Just make it equitable, just put the same number in place. And they said, no, so that's fine. So I just wanted to mention that. So signage is really important. So what we did then do when the restriction came into place was we thought we'd look at the HGV Watch scheme, which is a police initiative like Speed Watch that Phil's part of. And their same idea is to be able to report HGVs to the police. They would then write to the hauliers and say, please don't do that again. Unfortunately, that was useless as well because that scheme doesn't work and hasn't worked and still doesn't work because they've had a software and system update problem. So their software and technology doesn't work. So we submitted at the start hundreds of these lorries going through, and then we realised after we'd said, how are you getting on? We haven't processed any and we can't process any, and they still can't process any a year on. So there we go, that's a good example of wasting our time. But that didn't let us, didn't stop us. So we did our own thing. So we sat and watched, monitored and recorded as many HGVs as we could, and then wrote to the hauliers, if they're identifiable, Hampton's come past, write to Hampton's and say, why is your lorry coming through? And we've been doing that ever since, and that has been quite successful. We've written to over 700 different organisations. This is a huge task. These are distinctly different organisations, some of which are multiple offenders, so there are many hundreds more vehicles that are coming through. But we've identified 700 different companies that are now on our books, and therefore we can write back to. And we've put a lot of effort into those main big offenders, and those that cause us the biggest problem, the big trucks. The aggregate lorries typically are the ones that cause the most problems, the shaking, the noise and everything else. So, and if you probably noticed, actually those guys, the McGeorges, Hampsons, Midland Quarry, all those big trucks, very, very few of those now. They've been very good. They've tried their hardest to help us. So that's what we've done. We carry on doing that, and that just takes a lot of our time doing that every day, and we carry on doing that. Also, we've been reporting those multiple offenders to the Road Haulage Association. If they're members, we find out if they're members on the website. To the FOR scheme, the Fleet Operator Recognition Scheme. Obviously, these FOR signs at the back of lorries. They like to put them on their websites because they say we're good citizens. But actually, what they do breaks their terms and conditions. So we get them to write to the hauliers as well to say you're in contravention of what you signed up to do. That sort of helps. And finally, to the DVSA, the licensing authority, because hauliers effectively have their vehicles monitored all the time for safety and all sorts of things. And some of those terms and conditions are about breaking the law and breaking speed restrictions. And operators have a thing called the Operator Compliance Risk Score. And all operators are measured by this score. And if the score goes up, then that's black marks. And when it comes around for their licence renewals, the police and the council can look at that and say, you've got all these points in your licence. And they can, in fact, refuse to renew their licence, and that just puts them out of business. So they are actually more scared of having OCRS points on their licence, effectively. So we've used any of those sort of vehicles to just try and put the pressure onto these hauliers. I know it's a bit long rambling, but it's all focusing down, I guess, to the tip of the arrow that we're actually starting to get some support. What's interesting is writing to every haulier and every time we see a vehicle, and we're still getting between 10 and 15 a day. So as Peter said, it's a damn sight better than it was, but we're still getting between 5 and 15 a day. And so in the middle of the week it's a lot, so we're still getting too many coming through. And writing to them is good because when it educates them, you can ask them the reason, you can embarrass them. But more than that is actually the companies don't know their drivers are offending. Unless they get a ticket and a ticket turns up, they have no idea that their drivers are doing that. So telling them means they can go and educate their drivers, and they can discipline them, and they have sanctions, and they can do all of those things. And they've been, on the whole, the big guys have been really good, and that's why I think they've reduced it. And the sanctions are multiple, and anybody who knows the haulage business, there are a lot of owner-operators that are subcontractors for the big guys. So a lot of the Hanson vehicles come through aren't owned by Hansons, they're owned by private companies with their logos on, and they do them as a contract for them. So that makes it a bit more difficult to discipline them. But actually what they do is they just stand them down. And they've been doing this. So they said, I'm sorry, you don't get any more work this week. And in the end, they can just stop them getting work altogether. So they are putting sanctions on their drivers. Those they employ, unfortunately, some have been sacked. And I don't like that at all. But these guys are just totally ignoring what they're being told. They're being given the usual warnings through their HR screens, 3, 4, 5 strikes. And if they just keep on ignoring it, they get sacked. Because in the end, it's bringing their companies in disrepute. So that's just an interesting part. Part of the other reason for writing is for us to understand why they're doing it. Why are these drivers still coming through, even though they know? So we've built up a bit of intelligence to understand what it is. And there's no surprises, we could have guessed this. The excuses are, I was following my sat-nav. And now we can say, well, what was the sat-nav? What was the make? What software version is it? And they can't hide behind that anymore because we know what software, what sat-navs are up to date. And the same with the fleet management software, the back-end systems that the hauliers all use to divert their lorries and track them. There's lots of trackers on lorries, so that's quite a good one. The second reason is I didn't see any signs. There we go. So I sent lots of photographs of signs to show them all the ones that they passed. And this is to the companies, and they can use that in front of their drivers to say you missed this big blue sign, this sign here, and that sign, and that sign. And that's good evidence, so that's useful. And the one they don't use as much now was, always used to be night time only, 11 till 7. And I didn't notice the signs had changed, but that's less and less used now. So, we had very little support from the County Council and Stilldown and from the police. But finally we were put in touch, and I'd like to raise this, with our local neighbourhood policing sergeant, Andy Caruana, who's the local neighbourhood policing sergeant from Spice. He came out to us and we had a meeting, a couple of meetings actually over here in Hilton, and he's been brilliant. He has been, within the resources he's got, which is him and a couple of specials and a PCSO to cover the whole of the area, he's been absolutely brilliant, very proactive, and really helped us an awful lot. And in fact, quick story, and I won't protract this too much, we were standing by the side of the road, Ken and I and he, and of course what happened, we're standing by the side of the road, an HGV comes down the road. So Andy stands out and stops him, and goes up to him and disappears off, obviously, and then came back after a little while in the cab and then said, oh, what happened? He said, oh, right, well, yeah, he said he was following his sat-nav. So police said, well, that's not an excuse, and well, you weren't paying attention, were you? And the sat-nav's out of date. That doesn't stop you breaking the law. No, it's probably not been updated recently, but I didn't see any signs. Ah, that's driving without due care and attention. He backpedaled as fast as he possibly could and said, give me the ticket, and he got a ticket, and that was it. And that was really good, because that just proves all the things we said before, the excuses they're using don't wash with the police. The problem is we can't get the police here to stop them. Andy and his guys are doing good jobs, they have stopped quite a few, they've given quite a few tickets out, but they just can't be here enough. So I just wanted to raise that. The other thing Andy has done is we said, look, give us your top 10 offenders. And we sent him the top 10 offenders. He wrote to every one of those with a brilliant letter, effectively warning them that the police is not just the busybodies by the side of the road doing an HGV watch type scheme, as we often get called. I'm sure speed watch guys get a bit of abuse as well. But the police, from a police email address, calculating all the things that they're doing and their OCRS points and all of the other things that can happen to them had a huge effect. So those top 10 got hit, and we're about to do another top 10 for the next look. So they're supporting it as well as they can, but it's as well as they can. And that's really it. So we're just continuing where we are. We're just monitoring daily the vehicles. We're writing to them, and I think we can sort of see that the numbers are coming down. They're not down far enough. The signage is crap. It needs sorting out, and that's our sort of next activity of what we can try to do to that. But that's not the only problem. The problem is that drivers are lawyers unto themselves, and we all know that. But now they know they can't get away with it. There is no hiding. Because when it first started out, loads came through because they just said, well, we know the police can't enforce. They don't enforce anything, so we can just carry on driving through. And when they started getting hauled up by their fleet managers and directors, and in some cases some of the big guys were sacked on the spot because they've been told by directors, we've been told 3 times now, and you're doing it again, no excuse, then that message gets around pretty quickly in the industry, so that sort of helps us. So that's HGV, the HAT update. Our next job is speeding, although we continue with the HGV activities. That's a bigger problem, I think, and I'm really, having asked the police and I know the Parish Council on it, what we do about speeding is a really big problem, and there's no easy answer to that one, bar cameras, and we can't afford those, so we will carry on that. And any suggestions from anybody else of things we can do, or anything you can do to help us, would be appreciated. Okay?
Any questions?
Any questions?
I've got a question.
Yes.
Andy, congratulations to the team for doing such a good job on the HGVs.
Yeah.
As a resident on Bolton Road, I'm very appreciative of that. I've noticed the effect of your actions. I have a question, which is, prior to the HGV ban coming into effect, what did your group mainly focus on? Was it just speeding?
It
And
was.
has that suffered because you were focusing so much on HGV?
No, it hasn't. So the data collectors have been really good because we baselined everything about 3 years ago, and that gave us a good view as to what things. So the speeding problem hasn't got particularly any worse, but it's not got any better. The speeding problem is at Church End. We've measured the speeding all around, and I'm sure Phil can attest to that the locations of where it is worse. So that's where we've got to try and do something and focus our time. Nothing has really changed too much. We did operate HGV Watch when it was working, but that was overnight, and therefore we're only doing that during the summer, and we weren't going to go in the middle of the night and do it, and very little more we could do about that. So, no, I used to be part of Speed Watch as well, so it was the speeding until the HGV ban came along.
Thank you.
It's been double, hasn't it, throughout the time that the HAT has been, the HGV thing has been a big focus, and speeding is, no speeding there, isn't it? So I think everybody in the village is grateful to the hard work you've done on following up the HGV ban. I know in terms of, we went for the HGV ban originally, and we got the overnight ban, and then this is the next great step, and this, what you've always been doing, what HAT's been doing has been fantastic. It's taken so much work that you've done, and hopefully the hauliers are taking notice.
Well, they are. We're never going to stop it, we know we're not. And what we're seeing now is we're getting more new companies coming through. I mean, there are so many, tens of thousands of hauliers.
Yeah.
So there's the odd one coming from Southampton to Peterborough, or taking a wrong turn, or any excuse they use.
Yeah.
So the mix of the regulars against the new ones has changed. That mix is very different. We see very few of the big hauliers you probably see. We have some that are just sticking 2 fingers up to us, and that's where Andy Kurana's good, because they basically just keep coming through, and they sometimes send a rude email back, or they just ignore it, and suddenly they stop, and Andy's had a word with them. So that's quite useful.
Yeah.
The big disappointment is the County Council. They just don't see it, I don't think. They don't care, but the response just really hasn't been equitable with what the status is. Just because signage is in compliant with the rules and regulations doesn't mean that it's good signage.
Hopefully we'll get the big blue sign on the Packworth bypass.
Yeah, if we get the big blue sign, not the little one, we need the big blue one that said turn right. Yeah, that will help.
That will hopefully.
And that just reduces the reasons, it's mitigating the excuses, it's objection handling. If they can come up and say I didn't see any signs, and there aren't any signs, it's a bit difficult to say. But if you, like we do, we say, here are the 4 signs you'll drive past. Big blue one that says, ahead, big round all saying, speed limit ahead. Another sign that says, all HGVs turn right and follow these 2 roads. There's very little excuse they can make. And if we can do the same from the south end to north, that would be really useful. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm intrigued to know what you think you're going to be able to do if a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is approved. Because it's not going to be big companies that are offending, it's going to be private individuals. So you're not going to have the same...
Personal opinion? It's nothing at all. I think it's going to be a waste of time.
Well, what I feel... And
they can't enforce 30. 20 is absolutely not enforceable. The police are not there to do that. So I think it's going to do relatively. What it does do, I think, what I've seen and read, is that if you've got a 40 limit, people will drive to 40. If you reduce it, they slow their speed down a bit, but only by a little bit. If they've got 20-mile-an-hour signs, they know it's not going to be enforced, this is the problem, then they'll drive to maybe 30. So I think we'll see a speed reduction. We're not going to get it below. So quick stats, at the south end of the village, and some of you know this because I send the stats around to you every week, the south end of the village where the MVAS device, the speed device is, over 56% of all vehicles exceed the speed limit there. Of all vehicles, 24 hours a day. And that's above 30. 25% exceed 35. And the numbers that exceed 50 is, hundreds a week exceeding 50 through there. And so I don't think a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is going to make a great deal of difference. And that's why I'm saying I don't know what the answer is for speeding. It has to be enforcement, and enforcement is via cameras or policemen. And neither of which are available to us unless we do work out a way of getting some technology support, I guess, for that. And legislation is changing, and that's going to help us, I think, in the future. So civil enforcement can take place, things like lorries by camera, can't at the moment. But the way it happens in London on bus lanes, and they also do weight limits as well. There is technology where a camera can look at a vehicle, decide it's a lorry, take its registration number, work out how heavy it is, and send it a ticket. But that's a civil enforcement. That's not a criminal enforcement. That law has changed now and is coming to Cambridgeshire. It's been enforced in Cambridge City Centre, and in about a year's time it could probably come out to the provinces. That will do for HGVs, but I think the same thing could happen for speeding as well. And the prices will come down because technology prices come down as long as the legislation keeps up with it.
In defence of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, if everybody drove at 20 miles an hour, parishioners, that would bring the speed limit down, the speed down in the village. Yeah? If you go to London and you drive through areas like Cricklewood and Ealing, they're all 20 miles an hour, and actually the traffic goes at about 22. So the speed limit has, the speed of the vehicles has come down. If you drive through Bourne, they have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit through Bourne, and believe it or not, the traffic goes at 20 miles an hour. So it does have an effect on people's views. Not everybody, I appreciate, but the majority of people, if you go to these places, you'll find they're driving at 20 miles an hour. Take the lead. You do get a nice stack of people behind you going through the village if you go down to 25.
We're currently getting back up to our pre-pandemic levels, which is about 50,000 vehicles a week coming through, and most of those aren't villages on 40 feet, and that's we are a through road still. Okay, lorries are reduced, but cars are coming through in the same volume, and I think that's sort of going to be the problem. But we need to work out some enforcement. So I don't know, more speed watch might be when the 20-mile limit comes in. I don't know what the answer is, quite honestly.
We don't know if we're going to get 20-mile-an-hour limit yet, but we might.
Anyway, I'll take far too much time.
No, thank you.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Village Hall, Community Garden or Speed Watch? Who would like to go next? You'll go next? Nicola? Nicola, you're going to do Village Hall.
Sorry, back to me. You're sick of me. So the Village Hall Committee said goodbye to a lot of long-standing members this year. Between them, they've got many, many years' service, so we thank them very much for that and for their contribution to the hall. The new committee is quite small. We have 7 members, but so far has been very effective. We had a fabulous Christmas extravaganza, masterminded by Helen Atwood, which was very well attended and great fun. We are in the process of recruiting a new caretaker. We have received a grant of £2,100 for the coronation event, So that's going to do things like put a marquee on the green and buy coronation commemorative medals for the children.
Not coronation chicken.
Not coronation chicken, no. I don't know if I could get my children to eat that. We've also received a grant of over £9,000 for new fire doors for the hall, which those of you who spend a lot of time in here will know that particularly those ones rattle a lot and they're very drafty, so that should also increase our security and our insulation. So we're very, very pleased about that because it's not a cheap job. So having that grant behind us means that we haven't had to dip too deep into the village hall coffers. So that's my short and sweet village hall report.
Any questions for Nicola on village hall matters?
I guess the heating is the question. Is there going to be some money to sort out the heating?
Well, we have an engineer coming tomorrow to try and fix the boiler again, but we have just installed a boost button, because one of the biggest problems we have with the heating is the fact that it gets left on. So when you come in here on a Monday morning and realise the heating's been whacked up to 5 and the hall's been heated to 32 degrees for the entire weekend. So we've installed a boost button which allows you to turn the heating on for an hour. So,
and then you can boost it again.
And then you can boost it again. If you're here for longer than an hour, you just go and press the button again.
Yeah.
But it means that no matter what the thermostat's left on, the heating will only come on for an hour. Obviously there's a frost out on it, so if it gets too cold in here, then the heating will
I mean, when we tried to boost it up to 5, it had been at 2, tried to boost it up to 5 and we couldn't get any heat.
No, the boiler's not been behaving this last week.
So it isn't just the boost button, there's something else going on.
No,
So.
we had the engineer out last week and he thought he'd fixed it, but apparently not, so he's coming back tomorrow morning.
Any other questions? Thank you. Right, next on the list then is Hilton Community Garden. I understand you.
Exciting.
Okay, do you have something
This is
to
all about
send
growth.
You've just dropped a piece of paper.
It's only a piece of paper.
Do you have something you can send me, Claire, or do you
I
need to
have.
take notes?
The
Marvellous.
whole thing.
I don't need to type them. I like that.
Am I right to leave here?
You can come and join us up here if you like. Shall I give you a chair?
I'll stand up, I'm fine.
Well, no, have a seat. We've got lots.
No, it's been a great privilege working on the community garden, and with all the donations and grants that we've received, we've been able to undertake some improvements. And amongst the donations, we're grateful for Parish Council's donation of £100 to help feed the birds. And Heather, our chair, is fantastic at getting grants. I don't know how she does it. Anyway, it's all there to fulfil our mission to create an oasis for the whole village to enjoy. So, improvements. Since last April, a car cover has been changed, transformed into a polytunnel. And this has been to grow tomatoes, chilies, peppers, and give a good overwinter cover for tender plants. And the engineer is sitting over there. We've had 2 water features which have been installed, a whisky barrel at the entrance and a little pond in front of the bird feeding station, very popular for the birds to have a quick sip after they've had a beak full of seeds in or out. We've got our new thing has been to invest in some perennial native plants which complement the native hedging we've got, and it'll be interesting to see how those survive, but the cowslips are doing very well and they are a bit of an endangered species. We've got a new herb garden which is doing very well, and with the help of a generous grant from the Cambridge Gardens Trust, at the moment work is progressing on edging, and it's all going to look very smart for the opening in July for the Gardens Scheme, which is the National Gardens Scheme, which is usually spoken of as the Yellow Book, and we as a village will feature in it. And not only will the community garden be open, but several private gardens as well. So that's going to be a big event for the whole village, and the village will need to be aware that there will be an influx of people that weekend. We've also been involved in community activities, and we contributed to the celebrations of the late Queen's Jubilee by creating a floral Union Jack, which was a development of which was assisted by young things and older things, putting the pots of red, white and blue petunias into the frame. So that was amazingly, it survived for a long time afterwards, and the petunias were then planted out into the garden and went on and on and on. Besides that, we had rainbows and brownies at various occasions over the year, and most recently we did a potato plant session. So they're all going to contribute. They're the Potato Challenge, which forms part of the Hilton Produce Show, which is part of Feast Week, when you get a prize if you manage to create more potatoes than anybody else. So that's all very exciting, and we meet on Saturday mornings for a couple of hours. We break for coffee and cake in the middle, and we would be delighted to see anybody from the village to contribute to those occasions. Anybody who comes is given a very warm welcome and cake. And something we talk about a lot is any surplus. Now, last year was not a good year, was it? Not with the drought. So we didn't get a huge surplus of anything. Got a lot of parsley, which we handed out. But we hope that in due course we will have vegetables and fruit to offer to the community. And the idea would be that people will come on a Saturday morning when we're there, and they will take up offers of food to take away and maybe make a donation or maybe not. So, as I say, it's all about growth. It's done amazingly well. We're very proud of it, and we all enjoy it. But it's not a club. It's for the whole village. So please do tell people, not only do we like people to come and sit in it, I mean, there's no pressure to actually work in it, but people I see in the good weather, and I've heard, people come regularly to sit in the community garden, particularly to enjoy the bird life that goes through. So we do spend a lot of money on feeding the birds, but it gives people so much pleasure that it's a pleasure to see the pleasure they take in it. But to advertise it as a place to be and work, that's what we aim to be part of the village community.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Any questions for Claire before she scoots off? She scooted. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Speedwatch. Oh, we want to do something.
Yeah, I'll do it from here if that's okay. I'll keep it brief because these chairs are getting awfully uncomfortable. So as I think probably everyone here knows, Hilton Speedwatch has been running for quite a number of years. Group of volunteers supported in inverted commas by local police. The volunteers give it their time to attempt to make Hilton a safer place, reducing speeding by having regular hourly sessions throughout the year, noting speeding cars and reporting those to the police, who then send letters and make visits on multiple repeat offenders as a result of those actions. The other thing we know through our experience is a group of people with high vis sitting on the edge of the road has a real traffic calming effect as we see the stats drop from the 55% that Andy mentioned to probably around the 25 to 30% when we're doing the monitoring at Church End. So yeah, just hunting some dummies with high-vis jackets on might do the trick.
You're out there,
anyway, I'd like to just thank Alan and Pat who ran it for the last few years and retired from that at the end of last year. And thanks to Phil for taking up the reporting elements of what they did, and to Michael who maintains the monitoring equipment we use. And just we're a very small group now. It's got thinner and thinner, so everyone's working harder and harder to keep up the number of sessions. So we always welcome volunteers. A couple of hours a month maximum is all it involves, and from that you'll get baking tips, gardening tips, and any other gossip from the village. It's very educational. Just a quick roll call to say thanks to Jan, Mike, Peter, Sue, Alan. Aileen, Michael, Phil and Alistair, who are the regulars, and we're desperate to get more members to kind of share the workload. So if anyone can spare a couple of hours a month, please do get in touch with us. Also, like to thank Hatu. We've heard all about their good work, because certainly the information we get from the equipment that they maintain and share the stats for is useful to help us target the right areas for our speedwatch activities. And definitely the support they've given us on the HGV. Chase-ups when we've seen people on speedwatch and recording the HGVs has been really, really helpful. So thanks to Hat. And yeah, please come and join us.
Thank you. Do you put a little note in Spectrum?
Yeah, every so
to say,
yeah,
come and
it's-
join
but I
us.
think it's,
Difficult.
low responses. We did have 3, just as I took over the coordination. We were given 3 subsequently dropped out as they had a change in circumstances or were uncontactable in one case. So it's always a bit of a challenge. But it is good fun. We don't do it in bad weather.
Don't blame me. Thank you, Rob. Anybody got any questions for Rob? No? Okay, so that's the presentations from Village Group, so thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is general question time. So, does anybody have any questions? Generally.
We've had one question.
And we've had one question submitted, but Karen.
So I think it'd be most suitable at this point to do some thank yous, actually, because we've heard a lot this evening of community gardens, traffic, speedwatch, Parish Council, Village Hall, Keys Week, I don't miss anybody, Town Trust.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of activity and a lot of thanks need to be sent to those individuals who are not here, okay, but give their time willingly. I think that needs to be recorded for future generations almost.
Well, yeah.
So that's the starting point, is the thank you. The second point, apologies, I didn't realise I had to submit a question.
It was only, just in case we were
My
inundated.
question really relates to finance. I suspect lots of us got council tax bills coming through. And when I looked at it, and as I thumbed down the percentage increases, I was a bit taken aback by Hilton's Parish Council. This is for my house, at 10.7%. And looking at the District Council at 3.3%, and the fire at 6.6 and the police at 5.8, got me thinking, why? Why did you want this big increase? I think we've heard a little bit about cost of living this evening. And I think actually, not even think about it now, we've all got our bills.
Yeah.
But I do think the parish need to seriously look about efficiencies and some savings, because I wouldn't want to see that next year. Okay. People are having tough times, and I think you need to think about that as you go forward over the year with the budgets and things coming in, you have to pay and how much it is. The other bit actually is having had some discussion with a few friends, they said to me, why did it need it? So I think perhaps you need to think about communicating by Spectrum, I would suggest, is the best avenue, as to a little bit more about why you needed to increase it by 10.7%.
I think that was all reported at the time when it was discussed at the Parish Council meeting.
Yes.
And the Finance Committee meeting, so that the information will be out there. If you want to tell your friends, it will be out there on the Parish Council website in the minutes of those meetings, correct?
Yeah, the
I think Spectrum actually, sorry, I think it needs to be a little bit more focused on the village, and I think Spectrum's a good avenue for that. So I would put that to you as a suggestion that you take forward to communicate that, particularly this year, as to the why question.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's fine.
On the 10.7%, that is partly due to what I said about the tax base decreasing.
Yes, I understand that.
So obviously the actual increase that the Parish Council applied for was 9.7%, but because of that decrease in the tax base, that then increases the burden on individuals that are still paying.
Yes. I will just repeat, the district council is 3.3%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, fine. Good. We had one question submitted online, which was asking us how much it would cost to remove the spoil from the green, and that we don't know yet because the contractor is saying he needs to assess how much it's going to weigh, as opposed to a number of loads. So that's why it's still up in the air and will be discussed at the next Parish Council meeting. So that was, and that parishioner has been replied to. Any other questions generally, or general questions?
I'd just like to
Claire.
propose a vote of thanks to the people who planted the daffodils along the east wall of the church. Since I happen to live opposite, it has given me great delight to see it. They've all come up, so thank you to all those people who did it, and to the villager who initiated it.
I'll second.
Thank you. Saw some nice ones. Okay, well, if there are no other questions and other points, then I would like to just thank you all. Phil, sorry.
If we are allowing questions,
Yes.
With a church hat on for a second, how are plans progressing with the prospect of the churchyard being full sometime in the next 5 to 10 years?
We need a meeting. We need a meeting, and we need to do that. So let's arrange it, and then we can discuss what that could happen. Yeah, thank you, Phil. It is a good prompt and reminder, because I did form a working group too, and we haven't done anything, because there was another possibility of something, but that has seemed to have stalled at the moment, so we'll do that. So, in line with the comments made, I'd like to thank everybody who's come tonight and has helped the village. It's a small number of people within the village that do all these groups and committees and such like, councils and HAT and Speedwatch, Town Trust. Thank you to everybody. Community Garden, just as I remember. WI, we've missed their report this year, which is a shame, isn't it? But, yeah. Hopefully they'll be back next year.
Hope so.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen just like that, does it? It takes people to give their time to make it happen. So thank you to everybody for that. And thank you for coming to see. We'll close the meeting.